Can't decide if this camera angle looks right, but we're just gonna go with it. Hi. Hey everyone, my name's Chloe, welcome back to my channel. Thank you for being here today. So, I am here today with a video that is inspired by Jade from JD Ray Reads. I'm going to link her original video down below. But basically this was a video that she did during VEDA, which was Video Every Day in April. And she did something which was called the Bookish Wheel of Emotions. So it is inspired by a theory, a scientific theory that there are, I can't even remember how many types, but there are only a certain number of emotions, and all those sort of make up all the smaller types of emotion as well, but basically that there is a core set of emotions and that makes up everything that a human can feel. And what she decided to do was make that into kind of a tag and talk about books that link to each of those emotions. So today I have a stack of books at the side of me. I have the list of emotions and I am going to get to it and sort of let you guys get to know my bookish wheel of emotions. So I'm going to preface this actually by saying that I am trying to pick books that I haven't talked about before, because the first prompt is Joy, which is a book that brings you pure joy, had nothing but a joyful experience when reading it. Now, I think a lot of the times I've talked about sort of comfort reads of mine, which generally has been things like Red, White and Royal Blue, or I've spoke about Love, Simon a few times as well. And I know I have mentioned this next book a couple of times, but not quite as much or not quite as recently. And also there's only a few books I can sort of point out to all my shelves and think, yes, that is just pure joy in a book, and this is definitely one of them. And also we've just had the newest volume out, so it's definitely on my mind at the minute. But that is Heartstopper by Alice Oseman. I don't think you can find somebody who's read this book and not just smiled at it, even if it's not necessarily your type of thing. It's just adorable. It tells the story of two teenage boys who meet at school, and one of them is out as gay at school, one of them is kind of figuring out his sexuality, and it starts as a friendship, it ends as a romance. We are now up to volume 4. There's going to be 5 volumes in total. Well, normally actually I've read a little bit ahead because I support Alice on Patreon, so I read the pages as she draws them and she puts them up every night. But in really exciting news, the TV show is being made of this at the minute, which actually means that the pages aren't being drawn quite as quickly as usual. She's taking a little bit of a break, so I'm basically up to the point that all you guys are as well, and I'm dying to see what happens. I don't want it to end, but I really do want to see more of this story. It's kind of a win-lose situation. Like, I'm happy to get more, but then I don't want it to end. We'll see how it goes, but it is just absolutely adorable. Whenever you want a little bit of cheer up, it's a perfect book to pick up because it is obviously a graphic novel. It's not the smallest graphic novel, but the pages, there's not a lot of writing on each page either, so it's not going to take you long to read. It's just a quick little uplift, and yes, joy. It's Heartstopper. So for the second prompt, that is Trust, which is an author that you would trust. Anything that they bring out you are going to read and trust that you are going to enjoy it. Now again, I'm trying to pick things that I haven't spoke about too much before, so it could be quite obvious that I could talk about V.E. Schwab. I've spoke about Leigh Bardugo before. There's plenty of authors that I really enjoy and will buy anything that they write, but I'm going to speak about 2 authors kind of, but really it's because of something sort of larger than just their books is the reason why I will trust anything that these 2 write, and that is John and Hank Green. So John Green obviously is known for being quite a prolific young adult author. He's most known for The Fault in Our Stars. I think especially a few years ago on BookTube, everybody had read that. There are sort of trends in the book community, definitely, and I feel like that type of story was something that was very popular a few years ago, maybe isn't quite as popular now. It just seemed to be shifting more and more towards fantasy. But there is something about John Green's writing that I have always loved. In particular, Turtles All the Way Down. This one deals a lot with mental health. The thing with a lot of John Green's stories is that what they are about isn't actually what they are about. So this technically, if you read the synopsis, says it's about sort of a mystery of finding out something about a billionaire who goes missing or something like that. I'm going to have to check. Yeah, pursue the mystery of the fugitive billionaire Russell Pickett. that is not what this story is about. This story is about OCD and anxiety and about how the main character deals with that, and it is very much a story where you are inside her head, and it's probably one of the most realistic portrayals of a panic attack in a book that I've seen. I wouldn't suggest reading this if you are not feeling the best yourself, because it's anxiety inducing in the way that it talks about anxiety. But it's one of my favourite books that I've ever read. Like, I adore this book. And I also adore Hank Green's book. So this one's an absolutely remarkable thing. There is also a beautifully foolish endeavour. Try saying that 10 times fast. This tells the story of April May, who one day discovers a giant metal type structure out on the street. She decides to film a YouTube video with it, and that video goes viral, and it ends up actually being sort of first contact with aliens. Basically a story about internet fame told through this alien storyline, and it's about sort of how communities are built online and also the perils of that. It's very, very interesting, and particularly as somebody who has watched John and Hank Green's internet community grow over the last, well, it's been what, 13 years now, I think, 14 years. It's been a while. I've been watching them for probably about the last 12 years, and that's the reason why I would say that I trust both of these with whatever they write. I sort of religiously watch their videos they put out. For anyone who doesn't know, because there are some people who will just associate with John and Hank with books, but they do have a YouTube channel called Vlog Brothers. They make videos every week to each other. So it started off as something called Brotherhood 2.0, which was like a year-long experiment where they realised that they were only communicating with each other through emails and texts, and they were never actually sort of speaking to each other, and they lived on opposite sides of the country. So what they did is they made videos to each other, one every weekday for a full year. So basically you'd have every Monday to Friday would alternate between them. And then that ended up forming a community, and it was in the very early days of YouTube. So what's happened from that is that the video series has carried on. It's sort of changed in how it's set up throughout the years, but right now it's a video each every week. So John does Tuesday video, Hank does Friday videos, and it is about sort of them as brothers, but it's about a lot more than that as well. They talk about bigger issues, they talk about stupid stuff at times as well. It's hard to describe if you don't follow that community, but for me that's been something that's been very important in my life. It's called the Nerd Fighter community, and I'm a very proud sort of participant of that. If you could see my walls over here, there are just posters that are all to do with being a nerd fighter over there. So I would trust anything that these two write, because I basically will watch anything that they make and I will read anything that they write, and that is kind of what this question's about. So trust either of the Green brothers. The next emotion that we have is fear. So it's a book that intimidates you. I am definitely going to say for this Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. Now, I don't think that this is going to be necessarily the hardest book to read in terms of the writing style. I've not heard anything that throws me off about that. Sometimes when you get sort of big epic books, you do worry that the writing style is going to be a little bit too much as well. This one, I actually think from what I've heard, I would very much enjoy her writing style. It is purely the size of it that terrifies me, because I know that if I am not in the mood to read this, I don't like DNFing things. So if I sort of start reading it and get about this far through and then I'm just not in the mood, that is just going to stare at me, and I'll just won't pick it up, but I won't pick anything else up either. So it could very well send me into a reading slump, which is why I'm a little bit scared of reading it. I do know that it is in parts, and from what I've been told, yes, there's parts on here. From what I've been told, each of these can basically be read as an individual book, so that might be the way to go with it. I don't actually know what drew me to buying this. I haven't read anything that Samantha Shannon has written before. I own the Bone season, but I haven't read it yet. I just kept hearing good things about it. I was starting to get back into reading fantasy, and then I went to YALC, which is Young Adult LitCon, and Samantha Shannon was signing things that day. I didn't have my copy of the Bone season, so I went to, they had a little stand where that was set up by Waterstones where you could buy things. So I went and bought my own copy of Priory and got it signed. So now I feel like I have to read it, but it does just sit on my shelves and kind of stare at me. I think the other thing is as well is that, especially doing things like this, is that you make a TBR every month, and I feel like everyone's trying to read as many books as they can. if I read this, I'm possibly only going to read about another 2 books that month, because this is going to take a while. And I think that puts me off a little bit as well. So my Goodreads reading goal for every year is 52 books. I am at 51 at the minute, which means that I have nearly hit my Goodreads goal. My actual sort of stretch goal for the year is 100. So if I get to 100 and I've still got time left at the end of the year, I feel like that'll be when I say, well, I can read this now because I've hit all my goals, so it doesn't matter if it slows me down a bit. But yes, slightly terrifying. So the next prompt is surprise. So that is a book that surprised you in how much you enjoyed it. I mean, I suppose it could surprise you in how much you hated it as well, but we have more negative questions coming up. So we've gone for something that surprised me in how much I enjoyed it, and that is Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. So this is not my usual type of book. I said I've been sort of getting into fantasy more and more, and this is fantasy, but it's sort of more fantasy the further on it gets in the series. For this first book, it is very much just a grimdark story about war, and that is not something I usually read. Like, I'm not a sort of big epic reader. I like fantasy that has a little bit more of an accessible route into it for me. I like fantasy that's got a little bit of romance because that seems to be a bit more accessible. But this sort of more epic story is not necessarily what I'd reach for. I had just heard very, very good things about it, and then when Illumicrate announced that they were doing their special edition boxes, I sort of saw the hype on those as well, and I was like, look, if I don't buy these, I'm probably going to regret it, so maybe I will try and read at least the first one before it goes on sale. So I got it from the library and actually ended up really, really enjoying this. I mean, so much so that I would actually say that this is one of my favourite series now. Also, definitely one of my favourite editions of a book I own, because look at those edges. But yeah, I'm very happy that sort of that Illumicrate sale spurred me on to read this, because I read this one and the Dragon Republic in very quick succession, then read The Burning God as soon as that came out, as soon as I got the Illumicrate version. And yeah, like I said, definitely up there with favourite books of all time now. So surprising, because it's not what I normally reach for, but has also made me question if what I normally reach for is something that I need to kind of not think about when I'm picking stuff up, because who knows what I'm going to enjoy. The next prompt is sadness. So I know when Jade did this, she'd already done a video about books that made her cry, so she went more for something that saddened her because she didn't enjoy it. I have literally just gone for books that made me cry, and I've got a couple of answers here. I was trying to think that, like, there's not many books that full on make me like bawl my eyes out. Actually, when I was talking about Turtles All the Way Down earlier, that makes me cry depending on what mood I'm in when I read it. But one of the books that does tend to get to me, and it's a book that I've read a few times now, kind of along the same vein, is Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky. So this tells the story of Charlie, and Charlie basically is a wallflower. He's never really fit in at school. He's kind of just always hanging around in the background, and this is just a story of him sort of making friends for the first time. He gets in with this friend group, but he's kind of doesn't really know what he's doing, and because he's never really been in that type of situation before. But then alongside that, it's all told in the form of Charlie writing letters to somebody, and you don't really know who he's writing these letters to, and there's a lot of sort of like allusions to something that has happened in the past. And it's when you get to that point where you sort of figure out a little bit more about who he is and kind of why he acts the way that he does, it starts to get fairly emotional. I'm not going to go too much into it because there will be spoilers, but I actually read this after seeing the film, and the film is one of my favourite films and favourite book to movie adaptations I've ever seen. I don't know, there's just something about this that sort of hits in the feels a little bit when you read it. It's a really short book, so again, it's one that I've sort of picked up a few times because it's a really easy read. But yeah, it's one that's kind of stuck with me, and I think, and that's probably why I'd say this for sadness. I would also say that purely for, again, not spoilers, but I'm just going to hold this one up, and if you've read it, I think you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, this one, and especially now having got back into this universe, one having read King of Scars, reread King of Scars and read Rule of Wolves that comes after this, and so sort of knowing what happens after and that breaking my heart a little bit more, and also having watched the TV series and sort of knowing what's to come, it's made me, I really want to reread this, but I really don't want to go through the heartbreak again. So the next prompt is Disgust, and this is a book that disgusted you for whatever reason. So I suppose you could say that it is something that is like vile and you just don't want to read it. You could also just say that it's something that turned you off from a book, and that's kind of the route that I'm going down instead. So I struggled to find an answer for this question and actually the next question as well, because I tend to, if I don't like a book, I don't tend to think about it too much. It kind of gets put from my mind. I do not like to focus on the negatives. So when there's something that I didn't like, it will be very hard for me to sort of make a list of books I absolutely hated. There'll be plenty that I've rated low, but I won't tend to think of them off the top of my head very easily. Also, I do have a slight issue with overrating things that I actually disliked. When I look through my Goodreads at books that I rated a few years ago, I would give things 3 stars when I sort of didn't enjoy them, thinking, oh, but I can see why some people would like it, whereas realistically, from my personal opinion, I should have rated it lower. And yeah, I think that there's definitely some inconsistency there. So if I'm having a look through to see what I didn't like, it's hard to figure out because I'm like, why did I rate that high? Anyway, that is a little bit off topic, but there is a book that comes to mind that is a more recent read, and I gave that one 1 star, and that is Fix Her Up by Tessa Bailey. Now, this is a book that I read because I believe it was Chelsea from Chelsea Doling Reads who read this one, and she loves all of Tessa Bailey's work. So this is actually part of a series. It is, I can't remember what the name of the series is. It's like called Hot and Hammered or something like that. It's basically about a group of siblings who all work for their family, like it's something to do with houses, I believe, the family firm. And this is how much I remember this book. Like I said, if I don't like it, I put it from my head. The issue I had with this wasn't anything to do with the storyline. It wasn't anything sort of too major. It was just one particular thing that put me off and kind of spoiled the rest of the book for me and made me not want to read any of the rest of the series. And that is to do with the way that certain language was used during the smut scenes. Now, I am all for a smut scene in a book. That is absolutely fine. But do you know when you're reading something and there's just like certain language that is used, and I'm not talking like offensive language or anything like that, but it's just something that kind of takes you out of the moment and you're like, that doesn't sound like, it just doesn't sound good. Like, it was, I can't even remember what the word was, but it was just something to do with the way that things were described in that moment, and I was just like, you know what, this is not the one. And yeah, I sort of gave it the benefit of the doubt and carried on reading the book, and I read the entire book, and there's sort of, it's a fairly steamy book, there's multiple scenes like that in it, and every single one I was just like, no, can't do this. It was just a little bit cringy and it really put me off. And like I said, don't want to pick up anything by this author again because it's not really something that I can see vastly improving. It's just something to do with her writing style that I don't click with. So the next question is anger, and I struggled again to think of something to say with this one. I don't think that there is a book where I've read it and it sort of really made me angry for, I mean, there's probably been plenty where I've been angry that something's gone in a certain direction that I didn't really expect it to, but there's nothing that instantly comes to mind for it. The actual thing that comes to mind is something that I don't particularly want to give time to on this channel, and that's to do with the author that shall not be named and the fact that there is a series now that is sort of very conflicting to read. So yeah, probably something to do with that. Like, every time a new scandal comes out about an author, it does kind of taint the reading experience. There's plenty of authors that I actually haven't read books from yet, but I have books on my TBR I was planning to read, and now I feel like I'm not sure if I want to. And I know that you can kind of separate the author from the book. I know that everybody does make mistakes and that people should be given the time to grow and learn from them. But obviously some authors handle this better than others. Some of them acknowledge the mistakes and make sort of steps to rectify that. Some of them really don't. Some of them stand their ground and keep making transphobic comments. So yeah, I would just say that authors being problematic in general angers me a little bit. And then the last emotion on here is anticipation. So this is a book that you are anticipating coming out, and I'm trying to think of things for this because I have plenty of pre-orders throughout the year. I have a whole sort of page in my reading journal that has all of the pre-orders and things that I want for the rest of the year. But realistically, the answer for me is just anything by one of my favourite authors. I love reading from new authors. I love sort of finding debut stories. I especially love when you find a book from an author who has actually got a backlist that you've never read before, so then there's plenty to catch up on. I do love that, but there's nothing that quite beats the anticipation of a new book coming out by a favourite, because it is that sort of going back to that trust question where it's, I really think I'm going to love this, so I can't wait to go and get it, and it's sort of knowing when it's going to come out and almost like counting down to it. So there are a few for this. V. Schwab just announced a new book this week, and that is coming out next March, I believe. It is a YA fantasy, I think. It's described as Crimson Peak meets, I can't even remember what else, but she's been talking about writing it for a while, and that sounds very interesting. There is obviously also going to be the third book in the Villains series. So that's going to be called Victorious, which is going to be written after the next book in the Dark Shade of Magic series, which is a Threads of Power series. So it's basically another trilogy set in the same world. There's plenty coming from Victoria Schwab, so that is probably my most anticipated. I mean, there's also, like, there's a new Aristotle and Dante book, I believe. I'm just, like, sort of seeing what's behind me. There's a new TJ Klune book coming out. There's, what else have we got? I've got the sequel to Songs of Wraith and Ruin coming out. There's plenty coming out this year. One Last Stop, I've spoke about many times. What else have we got? I'm literally just looking at my shelves right now and going, look at all these new books that are coming out. So there's plenty, but yeah, I think anytime V. Schwab talks about something new coming out, that is when I'm just here for it. I'm also currently rereading Muse of Nightmares. So this year I have read, I think this is my 6th Laini Taylor book I'll have read this year, because I read the entire Dosab trilogy. I read Lips Touch 3 times, and then I've done a reread of Strange the Dreamer and now Muse of Nightmares. So I'm very, very looking forward to whenever Laini Taylor puts out something new. I know she's read bits of it for her Patreon, I believe. So I know there is something she's working on, but I have no idea when that's coming out. But I am very, very much excited for it, especially at the minute, having been in the middle of a reread. I'm sort of, and now I'm just looking at my wall because I have like artwork of favourite books over there, and I'm like, which one of you has got a new book coming out? But yeah, anything by a favourite author, if they have a new release coming out, I will pre-order it. I get excited whenever I get an email. I got an email saying that Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid had been dispatched this morning. I just like reading favourites because I like sort of the comfort of knowing that generally, even if there's something that I don't like about the story, there's also going to be something that I'm going to love, because if they're a favourite, there's something about their writing that just draws me in, and that is what I look for. That was a nice happy note to end the video on. And with other happy things, please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff down below. Please tell me a little bit about what makes up your Bookish Wheel of Emotions. Like I said, I will link Jade's original video down below. I really enjoyed sort of thinking about this, and I'm, like I said, trying to think of books that I haven't spoke about as much. And yeah, I'll see you guys this weekend with a new video, which will actually be my TBR for the next month, which is going to be the craziness that is Whatever You Want a Fan. So please do hit that subscribe button down below, because I will be here hopefully every week with vlogs. I am going to be reading all the queer contemporary that I possibly can during the month of June. So we're in for some fun. Thank you guys for watching. Bye.